You're driving down the highway, right? And suddenly, blink, you realize you have zero memory of the last 5 miles.
Oh, yeah. That is the absolute scariest feeling.
It really is. Your brain just completely checked out. You were stressing about a work email or maybe replaying an argument from yesterday, but somehow your hands kept the car perfectly in the lane.
Right, which is honestly a brilliant survival mechanism, at least, up to a point.
Well, yeah, until the guy next to you suddenly swerves. Then that autopilot is worse than useless. You have to snap back into reality immediately to avoid a crash.
Exactly.
But the thing is, what happens when that's not just how you drive, but how you live your entire life?
It's a profound question, and it's exactly why we're here today, because we spend so much of our existence physically present but mentally miles away. We're just letting deeply ingrained automatic programs run the show.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We've got an absolutely fascinating stack of sources on the table for you today, just an entire collection of excerpts from books exploring the deep architecture of emotional maturity and inner stability. Yeah, some really heavy hitters in here.
Oh, totally. We're talking about texts like The Anchor Within, The Architecture of Emotional Maturity, and The Space Between.
And these are powerful precisely because they don't treat psychology as some abstract academic exercise. They're incredibly practical blueprints for how we operate day to day, literally minute to minute.
Exactly. So here is the mission for you, the listener, today. We are going to extract the ultimate shortcut to becoming emotionally grounded.
The Holy Grail, basically.
Right. Our goal is to discover the actual mechanics of how to navigate this incredibly fast-moving, reactive world without being constantly swept away by it. Like how to stop being a passive passenger in your own mind.
Which is easier said than done.
Oh, absolutely. So, okay, let's unpack this, because the first big concept we need to tackle is this trap of living on autopilot, where our reactions are completely driven by impulse rather than intention.
Yeah, and to understand why we do this, we really have to look at the brain's baseline function. The brain is this massive energy-hogging organ, right?
Right, it takes up a ton of calories.
Exactly. And so to conserve cognitive fuel, it constantly offloads repetitive tasks to the basal ganglia, which is the habit center.
So it's basically trying to be efficient.
Totally efficient. We evolved this way purely for survival. I mean, if you had to consciously think about every single step you took while running from a predator, you wouldn't survive. You'd be eaten.
Because you'd be too busy calculating the angle of your foot on the grass.
Exactly. But the modern world has sort of hijacked this ancient hardware.
Because we aren't really running from predators anymore. We're running from, what, unread notifications and impossible expectations.
Precisely. We're living in an environment that almost forces us into unconscious emotional habits. You're pulled in a dozen directions by responsibilities, constant pings on your phone, unspoken social rules.
It's exhausting.
It is. We're expected to respond to messages instantly. And the crazy thing is, the brain treats a demanding email with the same physiological alarm as a rustling bush on the savannah.
Wait, really? It genuinely doesn't know the difference.
Chemically? No. So in this rapid movement, we end up carrying this massive backlog of unprocessed emotion, and we're just constantly reacting. Ping, react. Ping, react.
Wow, it's like letting a faulty algorithm drive your car. It's running on old, outdated code from past experiences.
That's a great way to put it.
But wait, hold on. I want to push back for a second. This sounds great in theory, but isn't it just human nature to assume that, if I finally get that promotion, or if I meet the right partner, or if my bank account finally hits that magic number, then I'll be calm?
Oh, the classic I'll be happy when trap.
Right. Because our entire society is built on the idea that inner peace is waiting on the other side of external success.
It is incredibly seductive to think that way.
Yeah.
And our culture absolutely reinforces it at every turn. But living like that is a totally unstable game.
Because the goalposts always move.
That, and the reality is, relying on external circumstances to dictate your internal weather is guarantee of suffering. The world is inherently unpredictable.
Yeah, the economy shifts, companies restructure.
Exactly. People change. If your peace is tied to the world behaving exactly the way you want it to, you're going to be constantly thrown off balance.
So you go from trying to carefully arrange the furniture of the whole world so you don't stub your toe to just, putting on a pair of shoes.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
True peace comes from internal alignment. It's that subtle shift where you stop asking, how do I control this outcome? And start asking, am I responding to this from a place of clarity, or am I reacting out of fear?
Right.
What's fascinating here is that two people can face the exact same stressful situation, say a sudden massive project change at work. They face the identical external event, yet experience it entirely differently based on their emotional architecture.
So one person is just overwhelmed, completely drained, and lashing out at their team.
Yeah, and the other remains grounded, clear, and composed.
And we should probably clarify here, because I think a lot of people assume the grounded person is just stoic, like they've somehow numbed themselves or they just don't care.
Oh, that's a huge misconception. Emotional maturity isn't about suppressing feelings at all. It's not about becoming a robot or distancing yourself from discomfort.
So what is it then?
Well, achieving that deep, unshakable calmness actually requires feeling fully. It means allowing the physical sensation of the emotion to wash over you without letting it hijack your behavior.
Which brings us to a huge practical problem, right? Because if we have to feel our emotions fully, rather than avoid them or numb them out with endless doom scrolling, how do we actually know what we're feeling?
Yeah, that's the tricky part.
Because let's be honest, most of the time it doesn't arrive with a neat little label. It just feels like a giant, messy knot of tension in your chest.
Right, and this is where we have to look beneath the surface. True self-awareness goes way deeper than just naming a primary color of emotion like mad or sad.
It's more complex than that.
Much more. You have to understand the underlying mechanics. What we call an emotion is often just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath it are thoughts, historical memories, and unmet needs shaping that feeling.
Okay, I want to make this concrete. So for you, listening right now, I want you to think about a highly specific, visceral trigger. Not something generic like a slow grocery line.
Right, go deeper.
Think about the feeling you get when it's 4:12 p.m. on a Friday, and you get a Slack message from your boss that just says, per my last email.
Oh, brutal.
Right, and suddenly your chest is tight, your face is hot, and you genuinely want to throw your laptop out the window.
That is a perfect example.
Yeah.
Because on the surface, that looks and feels like pure anger or intense frustration.
It definitely feels like anger.
But anger is almost always a secondary emotion. It acts as a bodyguard for something more vulnerable.
A bodyguard. That's interesting.
Yeah, if you dig under the hood of that Friday afternoon panic, the frustration is actually rooted in a feeling of powerlessness. And beneath that is anxiety, which stems from a deep fear of incompetence or a historical fear of losing your security.
Wow, so the trigger isn't random at all.
No, it rarely is about the actual email. It's almost always about a deeper belief system being activated. It's your nervous system remembering a time you weren't validated or felt unsafe and projecting that past trauma onto the present moment.
It really is like looking at the warning lights on a car dashboard. I mean, if the check engine light comes on, you don't take a hammer and smash the light.
Right, that would be suppressing the emotion.
But you also don't just stare at the light and scream at it. You have to pop the hood to see what's actually malfunctioning.
And that leads right into a core, unbreakable rule for emotional maturity. Emotions are information, not instructions.
Wait, say that again. Information, not instructions.
Exactly. Just because you feel a massive surge of defensiveness doesn't mean you're being instructed by your brain to send a sarcastic reply. It's just data.
It's just a dashboard light.
Yes, it's a light telling you that a boundary was crossed or an insecurity was poked. You need to observe that data with clear, compassionate curiosity rather than harsh self-criticism.
Okay, so we can't beat ourselves up for having the emotion. We just read the dashboard. But frankly, understanding what's under the hood is totally useless if we can't stop the car before it crashes into a wall.
That's the real challenge.
We have to talk about the actual mechanics of changing our behavior in the heat of the moment. Because when that fight or flight kicks in, logic completely goes out the window. How do we stop the crash?
To stop the crash, you have to understand the profound difference between a reaction and a response.
Yeah, okay.
Reactions are immediate, instinctual, and they happen without conscious thought. From a neurobiological standpoint, this is an amygdala hijack.
The amygdala being the fear center.
Exactly, the brain's threat detection center. It processes sensory input in milliseconds, way faster than the logical, rational prefrontal cortex can process it.
So the alarm bells are ringing before you even know what's happening.
Right. When you react, you're essentially responding from ancient survival memory, not from the present moment.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because this isn't just in your head. It's a massive physiological event. Oh, completely.
Your heart rate spikes to pump blood to your limbs so you can fight or run. Your jaw clenches. You get that overwhelming physical itch to interrupt the person talking.
You can literally feel it bubbling up.
But the absolute game changer here, according to the sources, is the simple act of a brief pause. Literally just 3 seconds.
That 3-second pause is everything. because it takes roughly that long for the slower, logical prefrontal cortex to catch up to the alarm bells of the amygdala.
So you're buying time for the smart part of your brain to boot up.
Exactly. By forcing a pause, you are physically allowing your higher brain functions to come online. It creates a gap between the emotion firing and the behavior executing.
And in that space, intention replaces impulse. Let's make this super real for you listening. Think about a time you received a text message that felt like a personal attack,
We've all been there.
and your thumbs instantly started flying across the screen, drafting just a devastating comeback. What would have happened if you had paused for just 3 seconds before hitting send? Just 3 seconds to take a deep breath. And that deep breath isn't just a metaphor, by the way. Physiologically, taking a slow, deep breath stimulates the vagus nerve.
Which does what, exactly?
It acts like a brake pedal for your nervous system. It sends a signal to your heart to slow down, which in turn signals your brain that you are actually safe, neutralizing the false threat.
Because in that pause, your logical brain finally shows up to the party and says, wait, I actually value my peace of mind way more than I value proving this person wrong right now, and you delete the draft.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, that 3-second pause is where you find profound freedom.
Freedom from what?
From your own automatic programming. The philosopher Viktor Frankl famously said that between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space is our power to choose.
That is a powerful quote.
It really is. That space is the freedom to finally align your actions with your actual values, rather than just endlessly repeating the same exhausting, destructive emotional cycles you've been running since childhood.
Okay, mastering this 3-second pause when you're alone with your phone is one thing. But what happens when another human being, someone with their own unpredictable emotional weather, enters the equation?
Yeah, the difficulty level skyrockets.
Because it's really easy to be emotionally mature when you're sitting alone in a quiet room drinking herbal tea.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yes, relationships are the ultimate testing ground. Closeness brings exposure. When you are deeply entangled with someone, it acts as a mirror.
Revealing all the ugly stuff.
Exactly. It reveals your unmet expectations, your deepest fears of abandonment, and your sharpest insecurities.
It highlights exactly where you feel secure and exactly where you don't. And when those insecurities get poked by a partner or a close friend, we default to incredibly predictable patterns.
We really do.
We go straight to blame, the classic, you always do this, or you never prioritize me, or we go to intense defensiveness, you're twisting my words, that's not what I meant.
Yeah.
Or my personal favorite, the total withdrawal. You just shut down, cross your arms, and dispense the silent treatment.
We do these things because, in the short term, they feel incredibly protective. They act as armor. But they ultimately create massive distance and resentment rather than any kind of actual resolution.
It's a cycle.
It is. It's a demand-withdraw pattern that can slowly destroy a connection.
Wait, hold on. I have to push back here again. This sounds great when everyone is rational and acting in good faith. But what if my coworker is just objectively wrong?
Okay, I hear you.
Or what if my partner is being completely unreasonable and just projecting their own bad day onto me? Don't I have to step in and correct the record? Don't I have to fix their perspective so the relationship can be healthy?
It feels incredibly urgent to correct them, doesn't it?
Always.
Because their negative emotion is making you uncomfortable, and you want to fix them so you can feel safe again. But emotional maturity isn't about acting as a judge, jury, and emotional manager for other people.
But it's also not about just taking it, right?
No, absolutely not. It's not about becoming a doormat. The mature approach is about setting incredibly healthy boundaries, but doing so without building massive defensive walls.
Boundaries, not walls. What's the practical difference there?
A wall is designed to shut the other person out completely, usually out of anger or fear. Like saying, I'm not talking to you when you're like this.
Which just shuts down the communication.
Right. A boundary, on the other hand, is about defining what you will participate in while keeping the door open to connection.
So how does that sound in practice?
It sounds like, I want to hear your perspective, but I can't engage in this conversation if we're raising our voices. It's shifting your language from the accusatory, you always, to the vulnerable, I feel.
So it's about differentiation.
Exactly. It's allowing other people to have their own distinct emotional experiences without you trying to control, manage, or fix them. You take complete responsibility for your own nervous system.
Meaning you don't rely on them to calm you down?
Right. You don't expect the other person to regulate your anxiety, and crucially, you stop trying to regulate theirs.
So if they are angry, you let them be angry. You don't absorb their panic like a sponge and try to frantically talk them out of it just so the room feels comfortable for you again.
Precisely. You remain your own anchor. You listen, you validate their experience, you respect their perspective, even if it wildly differs from yours, but you maintain your own internal stability. You don't catch their chaos like a cold.
That is heavy. And honestly, it sounds like an immense amount of work.
It's not easy, that's for sure.
So if I want to stop snapping at people or stop shrinking away from conflict, I can't just will myself to be better. I need actual mechanics. Having seen the goal here, these healthy relationships and this unshakable internal alignment, how do we actually build this architecture?
Well, the most encouraging reality here is that emotional maturity is not a final destination.
It's not a finish line.
No, you don't just cross a line one Tuesday and suddenly never get irritated in traffic again. It's a daily practice of neuroplasticity. You are literally rewiring your brain. And you build it in very quiet, largely unnoticed spaces.
It's the small reps at the emotional gym.
Yes, exactly.
It's choosing to listen to a disagreement without formulating your rebuttal while they're still talking. It's choosing to just notice the tightness in your chest during a stressful meeting without instantly speaking out of it.
The core mechanism for building this architecture requires bringing the unconscious into the conscious light. And the best tool for that, by far, is journaling.
But not just like a Dear Diary kind of venting. Right?
No, not just venting complaints onto a page. It's journaling to spot your specific algorithms. Writing physically slows down your thoughts and creates an objective external distance from the immediate emotion.
Because when it's on paper, it's outside of you. You can look at it like a scientist instead of being trapped inside the storm. And there are some great, honest questions you can ask yourself in that journal. Things like, why did this specific comment affect me so strongly? What was the underlying fear here? What was I secretly expecting them to do?
Those are perfect prompts. The second tool is actively practicing those mindful pauses we discussed earlier.
The 3 seconds.
Right. You don't wait for a massive fight to try it. You practice taking a deliberate 3-second breath before opening a stressful email or before walking through the front door after work.
You're training the muscle.
Yes, you are bushwhacking a new neural trail in the jungle of your brain so that when a real crisis hits, that pathway is cleared and ready to use.
So what does this all mean? When we put the pattern recognition of journaling together with the physical interruption of the pause, the underlying shift we are demanding of ourselves is how we treat our own failures.
That's a huge piece of it.
We have to radically move away from harsh self-judgment and move toward pure scientific curiosity. You cannot build this inner anchor if you're constantly berating yourself every time you slip up and get defensive.
No, because progress is absolutely not linear. If you spent 20 years reacting a certain way, it's going to take time to rewire that superhighway.
So give yourself some grace.
Exactly. Some days you will feel incredibly clear and grounded, and other days you will fall right back into old reactive traps. Both were essential parts of the process. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is consistency.
Right.
Each tiny moment of awareness, each successful pause strengthens your capacity. Over time, that inner foundation genuinely becomes unshakable.
Which brings us perfectly full circle. Building this quiet strength means that you no longer have to depend on everything in the external world going exactly your way for you to feel at peace.
It's an inside job.
Completely. The chaos of life, the unpredictable swerves in traffic, the sudden changes in plans, the difficult people, none of that is going to magically disappear. But you will no longer be consumed by it. You are no longer just a passive passenger on autopilot, bracing for the inevitable crash.
This raises an important question, though. As you move forward, the guiding motto for this lifelong practice should be, stay curious and stay resilient. True growth happens the moment we are willing to look at our own discomfort with deep curiosity rather than defensive fear.
And that brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with today. We spend so much of our lives, just an absolutely incredible amount of energy, trying to carefully arrange the outside world so that we never have to feel uncomfortable.
Oh, so much energy.
We try to control our partners, micromanage our jobs, and curate our environments, all to avoid a difficult, messy feeling. But if you truly master the pause we talked about today, if you learn to sit with the discomfort and become your own unshakable anchor, what bold choices would you make in your life right now, knowing you could perfectly handle whatever emotional weather comes your way? If you're no longer terrified of the storm, where do you steer the ship?
Wow, it changes everything.
It really does. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.